Hey everyone, I'm Vinod and I have a student with me today, Vidwatama Ramesh. He is from NIT Andhra Pradesh and he has a bunch of questions lined up for me and I'm super interested to hear from him what the questions are.
Yes, this is me, Vidvatma. I am a undergrad, first year undergrad at the National Institute of Technology, Andhra Pradesh, currently pursuing a degree in electronics and electrical engineering. I had a few questions directed towards Vinod sir for aspiring grad students, particularly the master's and PhD programs. And I have a set of questions which me and my batchmates have come together with, and we'd like to get them clarified.
Awesome, let's jump in straight away.
Okay. So one of the first questions which me and my batchmates had was which branch would be better for greater flexibility in the future? Would it be computer science engineering or electronics and communication engineering, considering the advent of technologies like VSLI and artificial intelligence and machine learning and advanced chatbots like ChatGPT as well?
Okay, I wrote a very long article on this, an essay on my a newsletter, which I really recommend that you read. So if you can give me a minute, I'll pull up the link and send it over to you. But okay, I'll make a note of it. Okay, I'll send it over to you. So, but basic idea is that there are going to be lots and lots of work happening in this space, automation. Forget AI, right? That's probably a different aspect in terms of the way the world is headed. But there's going to be lots and lots of opportunities, not just in terms of computer science, in terms of what's happening in that space, but there's going to be increasing automation happening in civil engineering, mechanical engineering, and so on. So I was actually talking to the professor who is leading career development center for IIT Madras just 4 days back. And I actually pointed this out as a great opportunity for not just CS students, but also for civil and mechanical students. So the opportunities in the future is not going to be very clear-cut computer science. It's going to be a mix of, for example, how do I use AI to solve problems with respect to rigging and like if you look at companies like Schlumberger, they're pretty much into drilling and excavating for oil. So how do they implement better solutions in the workplace? Okay, let's look at Micron Technologies. How do they use AI and probably replace a lot of process engineers who probably are not doing the greatest work anyway in terms of semiconductor manufacturing and fab manufacturing? So for these problems, what happens is that you need someone who understands not just computer science, but also understands mechanical engineering and manufacturing engineering. So I think the world of the future will involve, yes, having some understanding of what's happening in the space of automation, computer science, electrical engineering, and so on. But more importantly, it's going to be about applications. And that's where the huge multi-billion dollar or trillion-dollar opportunities are going to reside. Because if you look at the classic computer science problems, right? For example, like Google search and Microsoft search, people know what the problem is. A lot of people already jumped into it, right? It's very difficult for you, a newcomer, to change the needle dramatically. But the virgin fields, the untouched fields so far are fields like mechanical engineering. Like I worked in the shop floor. I'm a mechanical engineer by training, right? How do you bring the concepts of AI into a shop floor, like into car manufacturing, right? These are tough questions because a computer science student by themselves cannot answer these questions. They don't even know how a shop floor works. So the best answers will be when somebody who understands mechanical engineering and computer science solves these problems. So I personally believe that the world is going to open up dramatically. Even if you're electrical electronics, you can apply the computer science based solutions in fab manufacturing. It could be in semiconductor manufacturing. It could be semiconductor fabrication, R&D, and so on. There's going to be inordinate amount of ways by which you can solve these problems. So my personal recommendation is every field, every skill is equally important, but it is going to be interdisciplinary, which means that you can't be a hardcore, just pure mechanical engineer anymore. You have to know computer science. So even you don't need to be an expert in computer science. You can actually hire a bunch of computer science like coders to solve your problem, but you have to define the problem for them. So my guess is that the world is going to open up dramatically, lots and lots of areas. Do not feel that it's just a world of computer science. There's going to be enormous opportunities in every possible space. And this is exactly what the professor at IIT Madras agreed with in terms of saying that, yes, students have not looked at it from this perspective. There's a big gap. There's going to be opportunities everywhere.
Thank you, sir, for your insight on that question. The second question we'd like to ask is as follows. What would be the impact of advanced AI, like particularly these chat bots like ChatGPT, which I mentioned earlier, on CS undergrads? Is the industry oversaturated with computer science undergrads, and is there no future growth possibilities?
Oh no. It's a complete misnomer. I think the enormous need for folks to understand AI. So let me give you an example. Amazon actually ended up laying off a bunch of people in Alexa, in AI, and so on. Now they're rehiring many of these folks and giving them higher positions than where they were before. So I think what happens is that when you look at layoffs, layoffs is not connected to technology evolution. Actually, layoffs is connected to COVID.
Okay.
During COVID, a lot of employees were working from home, and a lot of consumers are also sitting at home. So what happened is they were doing a lot of YouTube searching. They're doing a lot of like Bing searching, like Microsoft Bing searches. They're ordering material on Swiggy and Zomato and all these things, right? So what happened is that just internet usage spiked. Amazon shopping, for example, everyone is shopping on Amazon. So it just spiked, and everyone thought that this is going to be a trend which is going to last forever. So they're overhired during that period, and now they're laying off to get back to where they were before COVID. So it's just a correction. It's not a downturn. What is happening in terms of technology evolution is not linked to this layoff. So it's a tricky thing, right? It's all happening together, but the root causes of certain things are not the same as what we think it is. So what that means is that you're hearing news that computer science engineers are losing jobs. I'll tell you why some computer science engineers are losing jobs. Anybody who put product manager on their resume, right, got hired as a product manager, irrespective of whether they have the skills or not have the skills. I know, like in the Silicon Valley, anybody, right, who just mentioned on the LinkedIn profile product manager got hired as a product manager by big companies like the Amazon's mainly, and it's like obviously they don't have the skills, right? So when you want them to perform, they're not performing that well. So it's like the top creme de la creme, the best of folks always will have the jobs. It's the people who are the pretenders, right, who are not good enough. They will possibly have to do some retraining to learn the right skill sets. Okay, so that's one piece of it in terms of do not be worried about what's happening with layoffs. I just feel that it's a little bit of the market correcting itself. The future demands people with AI skill sets, right? Computer science skill sets. So there's going to be enormous demand for computer science folks in the future. And I think the market is already reflecting it, right? Like out of the 15 lakh students graduating every year in India, around 8 to 9 lakhs are actually in computer science. So the market is understands that, yeah, the opportunities are not in mechanical and civil, right? But what I'm trying to say is that there will be opportunities in mechanical and civil. Again, students are overreacting to what's happening in the market, but you should learn some computer science and you should have expertise in your core subject. That's really where the opportunities are. So in terms of, will computer science jobs impact? Absolutely not. So like I said, a lot of companies begin to, like all the laid off people are beginning to be rehired once again. So it's like marketing is correcting itself. It's a very bad decision to let go of people, and there's a lot of peer pressure. I don't think you guys realize it, but CEOs are just like normal people, right? If Google is laying off, Microsoft is laying off, then Zuckerberg will also face the same problem, saying, how can I keep people when everybody else is laying off? So it's almost like they're following the herd and not always guided by business instinct. And my sense is that now they're realizing that they made a mistake. Now looking at the success of ChatGPT, right now everyone is like, okay, let's get back all those people we fired and then bring them back to the company. So yeah, man, don't get upset by all the trends, like what happens in 1 year, 2 years. The other thing is you guys are not going to graduate next year. You're going to graduate 4 years later. Now the people getting laid off, right, when they joined their undergrad, they were probably, the market was booming, right? So there is a certain, you just don't know what's going to happen to the market. So like 4 years back, the people who joined computer science, booming markets, there were always job opportunities. But now Amazon is basically rescinding the campus offers. They're delaying it by 6 months to 8 months for the campus hires. So did you assume this will happen 4 years back? No, right? So it's like the world will keep changing. So now it looks bad, right? Now, again, you guys are going to graduate after 3 or 4 years. By the time market will come back to normal, again, it'll need people. So it's boom and bust. Don't worry too much. Just follow your heart, have a passion for what you do, and you will get the jobs you deserve. Don't worry about what's happening here. Career Bold as a site is actually interested in helping people with the right skill sets find the best possible jobs, especially the jobs which do not come to campus. So I would really love to invite all the NIT Andhra students, Andhra Pradesh students to join Career Bolt as and when we launch. I think it will specifically serve the best students, especially in the IITs, NITs, and top private engineering colleges really well.
All right. Thank you, sir. This was a part of our questions regarding the jobs. Now we'd like to go towards the questions in the grad school spectra.
Okay.
The first question which we'd like to ask is, what are the exact set of guidelines and things which we must achieve each year in a step-by-step manner to guarantee admits into top grad schools? Like, what are we supposed to do in the first year, the second year, the third year, and so on, so that we can guarantee admits into top grad schools like Stanford, Harvard, CMU, Berkeley, etc.
So getting graduate school admissions require lots of preparation. And like I mentioned earlier, it's all about doing research and being expert in research. So when you look at the title Master of Science, typically it's by research. There are two options. One is coursework and research, but let's not go there. Mostly when you say MS, you're talking about research-based programs, right? So PhD is all about research. So the better you make your research credentials, that's really what the professors are looking for. So everything else is secondary, like your grades, your CGPA, your GRE scores. Actually, there is a certain correlation between a very good GPA and your research potential, but it is not perfect. So even if you don't have good grades, you can still, by showing your aptitude for research, you can still get into very good programs. Okay. So again, the problem is also that there are a lot of very qualified candidates from across the world, right? There are hundreds and hundreds of candidates. So it's like professors can be as picky as they want. So let me put it this way. So year one, what you need to do, right? Again, I'll create a learning path exactly on this topic. I'll put it up on Career Bold, but I'll recount this for you just to help you understand. Year one, it's all about research, understanding research. Okay, I think that's the most important thing. So, Vidwatma, you are in computer science, is that correct?
No, sir, I'm in electrical and electronics, but I'm planning to
Electronics.
try for a branch upgrade.
So I think the first thing you will have to ask yourself is, it's a very difficult question to answer, but where will really your specialization look like? What's a specialization going to look like? For example, in your space, are you going to maybe pick up some machine learning skills, but have expertise in electrical engineering? Is that where you want to be? Or do you want to do courses in such a way that you kind of switch over to computer science as fast as possible? So those are questions you have to ask yourself. In most schools in the US, there's something called EECS, Electrical Engineering and Computer Science. That's really the name of the department. So they don't treat both as different options. Both are together. That's the way they look at it. Okay. So what you can do to yourself in the first year is work with, identify the space you want to firstly be in. Okay. I know it's tough. You probably maybe want to have 2-3 options, and then you can decide later into the where you want to be. Maybe identify in your college, identify 1 or 2 professors or nearby colleges, right? Somebody in your network or something, like identify a professor, reach out to them, say that you want to get involved in research very early on. So I think that's probably the number one thing you can do in your first year. Okay. So I think during your second year, what happens is that by the time you finish maybe 6-7 months of research in your first year and get to the second year, you have a good understanding of like, hey, is this the kind of work which I even feel passionate about? Is this the space for me? Do I want to be known as an expert in this space? So when you have a bachelor's degree, it says you're a bachelor of something. When you have a master's degree, it says you're a master of something, which means that you're best in that space. PhD means you are second to none in this world in that space. So you've done pioneering research in that space and you're the best in the world in that space. So you got to ask yourself in the second year, hey, where do I want to be the best in the world, right? Is this a space for me? And maybe that professor or the research is not good for you, and you can consider changing professors, moving to a new professor. But by your end of the second year, you have to lock down an area and a professor. Okay, so that's probably very important. From your third year onwards, right, you have to do a couple of things. One is prep for your GRE exams. Now, the GRE exam has become optional after COVID, but I still feel that it's a very valuable tool for separating students from the others. So highly recommend that people give their GRE exams and get a good score in that. And when I say a good score, I'm not talking about full score, that meaningless scores. I'm talking about a score which is probably at the 90th percentile for both verbal and quant. I've got a full score in the GRE myself, and I know that if you want to get I got that in my, I made multiple attempts to get there. It never happens to anyone in the first attempt. And the thing about GRE is that you can keep repeating your exam till you get your best possible score. So practice early and give it in your third year as if possible, the GRE exam. And there's something which again students are not aware of. For the cracking the verbal section, you have to read something called the Big Book. Yeah, so I'll share the link to Big Book with you separately. But there are around 4 to 5,000 words in the English language, which most people do not use, but it's very often used in the scientific world, in universities. And Indians typically don't use that. And if you're an American student, right, the time you write your SAT to get into college, you have to read the SAT word list, which is very similar to this, the word list I'm talking about. So they actually master it before they go to college. Since Indians don't do that, you have to master it at the time you go to grad school. Okay. So knowing that is super important. That takes time to study. I'm talking like 50 word lists. Each word list has probably around 100, maybe 100 to 200 words. There's a lot of work you have to do. 6-7 months of solid preparation only for the word list. I'll send over the list to you guys. Make sure you do that. There's something called like a lot of practice. Early ancient GRE test, right, used to have a paper-based test, and a lot of the practice will give you a hang of like how to crack these tests. You just need to keep on practicing. So that third year is basic GRE prep. I mean, that's the way I would put it. And somewhere during the second half of the third year, you also need to ask yourself, now that your research is going in a certain track, okay, now which professors would I want to work with? So I'll send you a link to already written a post on this topic on identifying professors. But the idea is that identify the top journal in that space. For example, electrical engineering, identify the tier 1 journal in that space. Every field has tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 journals. Identify the tier 1 journals in the space, the top 2, top 3. Download all the journals for the past couple of years and look at what are the topics being published. What is the hot research topics? And which professor is doing the research and which colleges are they based out of? Keep doing the analysis for a couple of months and you see some trends emerging, that there are certain schools which focus on certain areas, and there are certain professors who do a lot of research in certain areas, and you want to work with professors who do hardcore research and who publish lots and lots of papers. You want to work with them. That's the only way your PhD will be successful, right? So you get a list of those professors. You write to those professors in advance, somewhere to the end of your third year, right? Write to them, say, hey, I love your research. I read these papers. This is what I think about your papers. Offer your opinion. Offer them some recommendations on where you think they can do additional research and what your area of expertise is. It's a very uncommon way to do it, but professors are always looking for great students. Always looking for it. I mean, don't be disheartened if you hear that, hey, there's somebody who applied 100, 200 schools and nobody responded, right? That's because they didn't do the homework. If you do your homework and reach out, professors will respond. And they will let you know like how good you are, whether they're interested in your candidature, and they will even encourage you to apply. Pick that up as a signal that you have to apply. And when you do PhDs, you have to reach out to professors in advance. Don't do this thing like blindly applying and then hoping that someone picks you up. It doesn't work that way. Then you kind of identify that it's around 10 universities you're going to apply for, like 3 ambitious, 4 where you think you can get in, and another 3 safe colleges. Go forward, apply. And when you put in, like when you're, for example, if you want to join in August of a certain year, right? The December before that year, you have to finish your application process. So for example, if you want to join in August of this year, that's called the fall semester for a university, right? In December of 2022, you should have finished your application process, which is basically 7th semester, you should have finished your application process. So yeah, so 7th semester is all about putting in an application process, writing to professors, and the last semester is just waiting for results and making a decision. So that's really the summation of how things work. Everything else will fall in place if you kind of follow this framework. So hopefully that was of some use. Okay, Vidwatma, let's move on to the next question.
So regarding the sixth question, so which we had talked about earlier, how valuable is your CGPA for top grad school programs? I've noticed a common trend, and that is that almost everyone at top universities like what I mentioned earlier, Stanford, Harvard, Berkeley, etc., have CGPAs in the range of 9.6 to 9.8 plus. Is there a particular reason as to why the CGPAs are so high, and is there a particular requirement for really high CGPAs at these top universities?
Okay, that's a great question. Okay, so there's a answer is multi-layered. So let me shed on light on how the admissions committee looks at each application. And I've been part of a couple of admissions committees myself. Okay, like for example, the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I've been there. So first thing first, okay, there's a high correlation between your CGPA, grade point average, and your ability to do research and finish a PhD program. There's a high correlation. So in fact, if you look at all the indicators in your application, for example, your letters of recommendation, statement of purpose, your cumulative grade point average, your GRE scores, your research aptitude, right? If you look at all of these different metrics, the number one metric which predicts success in the PhD or master's program is CGPA or marks. Okay. So that's the reason why marks has a lot of focus when it comes to graduate school applications. Now, even equally as important as your cumulative grade point average is your ability to do research. So if you have fantastic research credentials, if you're published in top-notch journals, but you don't have a good CGPA, it's okay. Colleges always take you in. But most people, unfortunately, right, they don't have enough research publications. So if you don't have research publication, the only other index which the university can totally trust is that you need to have a good GPA. So, for example, I think in India, there's a kind of feeling that unless you belong to IITs and if you're in the unless you're in the top GPAs, you should not apply to MIT, Stanford, or Berkeley, right? I think it's a misapprehension. That's not true. There are lots and lots of students in the US who are not from well-known colleges, from US undergrad, but not from well-known colleges, who apply and get in. So I'll tell you the biggest reason why people don't get in is because they don't apply. So I think people should firstly have the courage to go forward and apply in schools where they think that they have a lot of fit. For example, if you do that homework around identifying professors based on research publications, you reach out professors in advance and then put in an application, your chances will be much, much higher. Now, if you don't do any homework and you're just sending your application hoping that somebody picks you up, then yes, if you don't do your homework, then the chances that you will be selected is going to be very low. And I'll tell you why IIT students have an advantage in the college admissions game. So what's happened is that not in the present, but in the past, around 60 to 70% of the batch used to go for higher studies. Like especially in the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s, right? Lots and lots of students used to go for higher studies from the IITs. So those are the students who are currently the professors. The students who went in that time, right? They are the professors right now. So there's just a culture that IITs have generated a huge set of generations of people who have gone in for higher studies. So if you have two good candidates, one from a not so well-known university versus another from IIT, it's just safer for the professors to select from the IITs because they just know the persons they're working with. They know the professors. Many of the IIT professors have probably worked in the same labs, have worked with the same professors in the past as students. So there's a familiarity, right? You will not do something which is very different from what you've done in the past. But that's one thing, okay, that IITs have a little bit of advantage for sure, but that does not prevent any other student from also getting in. And students don't get in because they don't apply. They just feel that they will not get in, right? That's just unfortunate. But a lot of students can also get in if they go forward and apply, and if they do the homework in terms of enhancing their research skills as much as possible. Again, as long as for what I tell IIT students, right? I'm right now a faculty at IIT Kerala, and what I recommend to students is that hey, anything above like 8.5 out of 10 is good enough for PhD programs. You don't necessarily need to be the like 9.8 and 10 out of 10. That's not if it's there, it's great, but it's not necessary, right? It's more important to show research prowess. So if you're applying for a master's program, anything above 7.5 is good enough for a master's program. Or anything above 8 is kind of safe for a master's program. So I would say that if you have a choice between should I spend more time increase from grades to 8.5 to 9.5 versus should I focus on research and get some publications out, I would highly recommend that you focus on research and get some publications out. There's so many students I know who are like 8.6, 8.7 who have gotten into like top programs at Berkeley and MIT and Stanford. It all depends on the statement of purpose, the letters of recommendations. And if you keep on focusing only on a grade point average, what happens is that you don't spend time trying to identify the best research professors. And once you end up in grad school, it'll be very difficult to change professors later on. Now, you can change, but if you are in the wrong program, for example, like I know people who have joined a physics PhD and then decided, hey, it is not going to work for me. Then they moved on to a material science PhD. Thing is, you'll waste years of your life. This person wasted 3 years of their life in a physics PhD, then realized it is not for him, moved on to a material science PhD later, and spent another 5 years getting it done. So it's just that we want to do 8 years PhD if you can get it done in 5 years. So if you spend too much time on coursework, you'll forget that there is a life beyond it. You have to do more homework. So if you identify the right field very early on and work on it, you can be trained from your second, third, fourth year. Then when you do your PhD, you can get trained. So what happens is maybe you can even do your PhD within like 3 years. It's not uncommon. You can get out much faster if you've done your homework in advance. So I know there was one distant friend of mine, my brother's friend basically. He IIT Madras, got to MIT, the EECS department, took 10 years to get out with a PhD. So what does that mean if you take 10 years to get out with a PhD? It means that that's not a fit for you. And ultimately ended up taking a job working in a company, which he could anyway have gotten with like any master's degree in computer science, any college, he could have gotten the job anyway. So like, why go to MIT, do a PhD for 10 years, right? I think sometimes Indian students need to pause a little, apply their mind in terms of like, is this the right choice, the career choice for me, right? Ask the big question first and then get down to just getting a high score. And I think that is probably the biggest advice I would give to students.
So that's the reason why you recommended us to actually enter the research field first within our undergrad years itself, so that we get a feel of the entire procedure which we have to experience over the next 5 years.
I'll share my example. Okay. So, even I was like you at one time, right? I was like, hey, I want to get into a MS PhD program, any cost, right? That's really where I wanted to be in. But when I began to do some research, I didn't do research in undergrad, but then I did research later. I knew that the research is not for me. Like, it's just not interesting enough. I actually like the practical application. I wanted to work in a place where I could apply the learnings in a business setting. So I ended up doing a master's in economics and HR. So it's very non-traditional. It's not in engineering. Then I did an MBA from the University of Wisconsin, again based on business, because for some reason, right? Then I went out for a PhD in again business. But again, the fact remains that engineering is not for everyone. Like, everyone has a certain skill they bring to the table. Remember these examples like Sundar Pichai, Satya Nadella. They are not engineers anymore. They're all business folks. Both have an MBA. You know why they did the MBA? Because they want to get out of engineering and tech and wanted to get into business facing roles. So again, I highly recommend that you may be a great engineer, but that does not define your life forever, right? I mean, after like Sundar Pichai worked in applied materials for 6 years after an master's from Stanford before he went to Wharton for an MBA. So by the time you touch your 30s, right, is when Sundar Pichai realized that maybe tech is not, material science is not for him. Likewise, Satya Nadella, right, he was working in computer science for a long, long time, and then he wanted to get into leadership roles. Went to Chicago Booth School of Business to do an MBA, like mid-career. Like I would guess like mid-30s, early 40s, something. So again, I'm saying everyone has a certain career path. So it's like you have to find it out yourself. Don't be part of a herd. A lot of people are doing something. Don't follow the herd, right? You customize what you want for yourself, and if you identify what is the real thing which you're excited about, you'll get to the goal much faster. So imagine if Sundar Pichai had worked in business right from day one, rather than go to IIT, Stanford, 6 years in applied math, and then come to business. He could probably have made even more difference to the world. That's my sense. So I just feel that even the most successful cases we see, right, are not necessarily the best examples either. So I was telling the ex-director of IIT Palakkad, when I met him in IIT Madras, I shared the same example saying Satya and Sundar are not the great best examples for careers, because I think they should have probably done things differently. And he agreed that, yeah, like, think for yourself, man. I think that's most important. So when you do research a couple of years, then you get a feel of, is this for me? Is it not for me? Based on that feedback, then you can decide what you want to do with your life.
All right, so thank you for your insight on that question. Um, Another thing which most of the students here would like to know is they wanted a brief run through on how you applied during your time. They wanted to know how did you go about the entire process and how you managed to bag admits at Stanford and Harvard and all.
Hey, okay, let's be clear, right? I mean, I did my first grad school application. This is probably 20 years back. So if you look at my career, I'm not probably the greatest example for students because I like to explore. So after my undergrad, I actually worked for a bunch of years in manufacturing engineering. I was working in a shop floor. So, I mean, I was well into my, like, well past my mid-20s when I applied for my master's program. Okay. So I got into IIT Bombay. I did my master's in management there. And I basically went forward applying to Cornell for a PhD program in economics. So again, my feeling was after IIT, you have to do a PhD. There's no reason why that was true, but I just felt that that's how it had to be done. So I ended up applying. I wanted to get to schools abroad. I couldn't sponsor my master's program. I was not rich enough. So I applied for a PhD. They gave me full funding, got me in for a PhD program. So when I ended up at Cornell in Ithaca, right, that's when I firstly began to think for myself, saying, hey, just because a lot of people are doing a PhD doesn't mean that I should also do a PhD. So Cornell has probably the number one economics program in the world, like especially in spaces like labor economics. I'm working with a guy called Gary Fields, the best professor in the world in that space. But just because they are the best doesn't mean that you should work with them and create a career under them, right? Will you also succeed in the same space, right? I had to ask myself that question. And I felt that it was very rigorous, very quant focused. And also the number of jobs available for economists, especially after doing a PhD, is not that high, especially for Indians, right? Getting into those jobs will require a lot of hard work. And again, things are not going to happen automatically. So I decided maybe it's not for me, and I dropped out from that program, left with a master's degree. So I was kind of like touching my 30s at that point of time. And then I was 28, 29 at that point of time. I then had no idea what to do. I had no idea what job even to pick up. So I picked up some courses from the Cornell Business School, the Johnson Business School, and I was like still confused. So Samsung Electronics came recruiting saying, we want engineers to work in HR. No engineer ever is in the space of HR. So I was kind of doing an HR specialization. None of my friends were in engineering. So I was the only person who fit their expectations, right? So I applied for an internship. I had no idea how it will turn up. Had a wonderful time in South Korea during my internship. This was in 2009. Then I got a full-time offer from them. And 2010 was a recession. There was no jobs in the US. So I was like, okay, I don't know how this is gonna work out, but let me spend a couple of years working in Samsung. So I spent a couple of years working in Samsung. Fantastic experience for the first couple of years. But then having a career in a country like Japan, Korea has some complexities, which I'll talk about later. But again, I just couldn't visualize myself being there forever. Then I was like, what do I do next? I was kind of in my early 30s, and people are like, hey, what are you doing? I mean, like, why don't you come back to India? And I had no idea what to do. So my brother was applying for MBA program. He was applying to a bunch of courses. And he went to University of Wisconsin-Madison, checked up some programs, and told me, hey, Wisconsin seems to be a great match for you. You should check it up. So I actually applied to, I mean, I was 100% sure that like nobody in my family was working at that point of time. So I was like, I was the only person working. So I was like, I have to work. Especially when my brother's going for MBA program, I got to work, right? So that was my impression. But still, I thought, let me just apply to a couple of colleges. Cambridge, it is a 1-year MBA program. I thought they may give me some funding. Apply to Cambridge, apply to Cornell for the MBA program, apply to Wisconsin-Madison for the MBA program. Okay. Um, that was it. I got admitted to all three. And Cambridge, no funding. Again, Cornell, no funding. Wisconsin was interesting. So the professor who did my interviews for Wisconsin MBA program, he was from the same program I graduated from earlier. So the Cornell, the economics program, right? So he was from there. He was head of the department for 10 years, and then he set up the business school at Wisconsin-Madison. He absolutely loved my profile. He thought I'd bring something unique to the table which nobody else can. So he said me, hey, Vinod, like 1 minute after talking to the professor, he was like, hey, Vinod, what should I give you to make sure that you enter this program? So I just blurted out, give me a full scholarship, pay for my waive my tuition fees, give me a full scholarship. By the way, it never ever happens for an MBA program. No MBA student ever gets full funding. So I asked for the impossible. Okay. I asked him that, like, you're talking to me, right? I asked him this question. He said, okay, done. Are you ready to join? At that point of time, I was so confused because I was like, wait, then who's gonna, like, I was not even sure who's gonna take care of the family and all that. So I was like, okay, give me, like, I was super confused. I said, give me 1 day to think over it. I talked to my parents. So they were like, hey, if that's really what you want to do, it's bizarre, untraditional, but if that's what you want to do, go forward, do it. So I went forward. I was like, okay, let's take forward this MBA program at Wisconsin. I graduated in 2016, working in General Mills for 2 years. Then I got into Silicon Valley in Cisco. Worked there for 3 years. Then I was promoted to a director of HR at one of the global data analytics companies called CDK Global. Actually, I was looking after like both the India and US operations, around 3,000 employees in US and around 2,000 employees in India. So I was kind of looking after that. But I also felt, okay, this is a bizarre story, but after all that experience, my green card was almost set in place. And I was thinking myself, like, I think I can accomplish whatever crazy things I want to do with my life, like go to the Far East. I've done that. Do an MS and MBA. I've done that. Go for I was also prepping for PhD at the same time. Like it was like a part-time PhD program. I was doing that at the same time. That's also almost done. I was like, what else do I want to do? Do I just want to create a career, or can I maybe deploy some of my expertise, come back to India and do something? So my brother, by the time, he was a director at Salesforce in San Francisco. So he went to Georgia Tech for his MBA. And he was also like, we are together in the Silicon Valley, and we thought both of us are going to come back together. So if you look at Career Bolt, right? So my brother is the CTO. He's running the show. He has like 10 IIT students working with him on this project. Then I'm kind of like trying to pull all these colleges together. So I'm kind of the CEO right now. So that's my story. So I think in my kind of 40s right now, and I'm like, I think it makes sense to probably come back to India and do something different. I don't know where this is going to lead, but I've seen that whatever I wanted to do happens ultimately. It takes a hell lot of time, but whatever you want will happen ultimately. So, like, okay, let me give you a different example. I think the more traditional paths are probably that you finish your undergrad, go straight for a PhD, right? That's a traditional path. So by the time you're 28, you want to finish your PhD, get working, then settle down in life, right? By your 30, 31, 32, you want to settle down. Like, that's really the target, which is great, which is fine. But I also feel that remember that you're targeting a career where you have to work from age 30 to age 65. Pretty much in the US, you retire at age 65. So do you have whatever skills you gain at that point of time? Do you think it's going to make you survive till age 65 for 35 years? I don't think so. I feel that you have to keep on learning new things. So one of the reasons why Parag Agarwal was very successful in Twitter, there was a very famous example I always share. One friend who was an IIT topper, gold medalist, right, and a JEE rank one, joined Twitter at the same time as Parag. Both were from the similar batches, like 1 year away from each other. Like Parag was 1 year junior to this guy. Both joined at the same level, software engineer. By the time that the JEE topper and the IIT Madras gold medalist got one promotion, Parag got 8 promotions. You know why that happened? That's because he would always spend time picking up new skills. He would always be on like websites like all the HackerRank, joining hackathons, picking skills on Coursera. In spite of having a PhD from Stanford, he was still learning. Now, I think the learning mindset is very important, right? You cannot stop learning. And I feel that in the future, whatever you would study right now will become obsolete within 10, 15 years. So my recommendation, again, this is probably the biggest takeaway with Vatama to cut the long conversation short, is that maybe it doesn't hurt to get a couple of years of work experience before going in for a master's or PhD. It will not hurt you at all. It will only help you with the job search process. If you have 1 or 2 years of or maybe 2, 3 years of work experience, recruiters will value you tremendously. And you also know what is it that the job market does, because industry has a very different way of focusing on short-term problems, easy to solve problems. There are a lot of politics, there are a lot of drama happening there in industry. And academia is always that big picture problems, something which is going to happen 10 years later, 20 years later. Very little of updates and progress. It's just like you keep on doing things what you are passionate about. And it's a very different world from the job sector, where like if you're looking at private sector, you have to give updates every week. We have 2, 3 meetings to give updates. This is not the way it works in academia. So I think you have to understand where do you fit in, right? I think that's what I'm trying to say, is that ask yourself the question, maybe get some work experience. It will not hurt you. Like I said, the people who are joining workplace right now are probably going to be working till age 65. And there's some recent statistics which says that in the US, since everybody's living longer, by the time you touch your 65 may not be the age of retirement. It's probably going to be 80, 85, whatever, right? That means, so it's like you probably cannot retire at age 65. It's probably going to be mid 70s or something. So whatever you study now, will it be enough for another 40, 50 years? Only you can answer the question.
Right. Thank you for your insight on that question, sir. It was very detailed. Um, One of our most important questions actually seems to be very popular is how
Did many people ask the question about what I did with my career?
around 7 to 8 people did, sir.
Wow, okay. I'm actually planning to write something on this topic, but very untraditional, very crazy. Not something I would recommend to most people.
It's a very exciting career decision. The career decisions you have taken are very exciting. Most
So I had
people
a
aspire
mechanical
to live
engineering
life.
degree and 4 years of work experience before I had any idea what to even do with my life. I would call myself a late bloomer. I think some people know everything well in the beginning, right? This is exactly what I want to do. I'm like, I have no idea what to do. So I kept on experimenting till something worked out.
That's what I did in 11th and 12th, sir. And then after I came to engineering, I decided to lock in on electronics and computer science. But unfortunately, in India, we do not have any EECS programs, as you mentioned
Right,
earlier.
right.
only
I'll tell you one more
even
fun story, right? Just to close the conversation. So my brother's case is also pretty similar to mine in terms of he's a material science metallurgy engineer from IIT Madras. He went straight to MIT, did his masters from there. He wanted to work in semiconductors in Asia, so he went to Singapore and worked for a bunch of years. So around 2012, he started switching to startup and all that. That's when he realized that he did not have the right business skills or computer science skills to make it big in the tech sector. So it was like he passed out from IIT Madras in 2006, went for an MBA in 2014 along with me, came out in 2016. And when he went to business school, right, he said, I don't want any of the jobs from business school. I want to chart out my own career. So he wanted to enter as a product manager. And actually, the product manager job is the most difficult job to get. Unless you have a computer science background, it's almost impossible to get that job. So my brother actually had to, so his entire 2 years at Georgia Tech, he was actually learning computer science from scratch. And he actually made somehow, he squeaked into Hewlett Packard. After that, it's pretty much like he went to AWS for a couple of years, and then he went to Salesforce where he became a director. So I'm just saying that he began super late, but then he just picked up everything in the last like 5-6 years, and it worked out really well for him. So I'm just saying that everybody has that. You'll discover what your true passion is either early on or later on, but keep experimenting. You'll find it.
but computer science is like a very important skill set, especially in this AI-driven economy right now.
Agree
So
totally.
everybody should definitely learn computer science is something which you would recommend, right?
Yes, exactly. Highly recommend. So, in fact, a bunch of students in mechanical civil, right? What I really recommend to them is that learn something about data analytics, right? Even if you don't want to switch towards computer science, just be comfortable with data analytics. Just know how to use Python. Python is a very simple language. There are a lot of libraries which are predefined. So try to understand something about it, right? Don't be like a person like an ostrich in the sand sort of person where you're like no idea what's happening in this space, right? The world is moving too fast, and you cannot say you don't know computer science. Now, if you know mechanical, you can apply it differently, but you can only apply that if you know computer science. So that's an absolutely required skill. I'm actually surprised that the colleges are not demanding that students know more computer science skills.
It will take some time for that change to happen in India.
So one more statistic about India is that there are 2.5 lakh jobs being generated in India, and out of that, 1.8 lakh jobs are in computer science and data analytics. So I mean, it's like 70% of jobs in India are in this space. Like if you're in core subjects, right, the chances of you getting those jobs are just 30%. But if you're computer science data analytics, it's probably 70% of the jobs are in that space. So just even by the demand supply curves of economics, right, you have to pick up the right skill sets.
Thank you, sir. The next question, which some people would like to ask, is how important is prestige of a college which we are applying to in comparison to the scholarship that they have offered? So let's say I've got in Wisconsin Madison, which is a very good school, but they have offered a scholarship, and let's say another person has gotten into Berkeley, but he's not got any scholarship. In that case, are we supposed to favor a scholarship or are we supposed to favor prestige? Because when we are entering certain funds, certain high frequency trading uh, firms, I guess, hedge funds, they value prestige a lot more than they do value, I guess, a scholarship provided grad school experience, I suppose. But most people have a doubt on whether they're supposed to pick up a college with prestige or are they supposed to pick up a college with a scholarship provision. And I think insights on that.
You asked me a bunch of questions here. Okay, so I'll try to answer one by one. First thing first is that I think prestige is overrated, especially in India, right? We just like to, I think it's probably a remnant of our colonial mindset is that we always club people into tiers saying that either you're there, not there. But life, unfortunately, is very different. People, for example, if you look at the CEO of Cisco, right? He's a bachelor in math from North Carolina State University. Not a well-known university, but then a lot of extremely smart people working under him, but they never become CEO, right? So again, it's all about what you bring to the table. Your colleges will only help you till a certain level. It could help you in academia, but in the job sector, it's a skill which counts, which is your people. So the technical skill is one piece, but there's also something called business skills and people skills. Unfortunately, many students from India are very, very bad in communication and people skills. They never think it's important. Like if you're looking at an American student, like an undergrad in computer science, right? They probably possess a little bit of technical skills, but they have outstanding communication skills. So if you're interviewing two students, one brilliant IIT student or someone who's got strong technical skills and someone who's probably got average technical skills but got fantastic communication skills, right? At least a US recruiter will choose the person with the better communication skills, not with the best technical skills.
Technical
People
skills.
skills, business skills are super important for the workplace, which we don't realize. Okay, we just think of technical skills will get us from point A to point B. It will not get you. In fact, there are just tens of thousands of students, right? The most brilliant students from India who are stuck in manager positions who have no path forward because they don't have the communication skills to go forward. It's too late for them to come and learn those skills. So there's a trap that you should be aware of it. There's so many people with PhD degrees and who are stuck in like entry-level management roles in the US. So no path to director and so on because they don't have the skills necessary. So most importantly, remember that the way in US industry values skills is different from how Indians look at skills. Okay, and they don't care which. I mean, as long as you're from a good school, if you have the right skill sets, that's all they care about. The other piece is that if you're looking at, say, the clustering of programs and ranking, it's important maybe for US undergrad programs, but not for US graduate programs. So if you ask me, I would say that any top 20 graduate program is almost the same as each other. So should I go to University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign? Should I go to MIT? That's a very academic question. If you're looking at the job prospects, every company which goes to MIT will pretty much go to University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, even though it's a Midwest school. Any college which goes to Stanford will pretty much go to University of Michigan. So anything in the top 20 equally good, okay? So don't get into now, but I heard that MIT, Stanford, Berkeley, that is only like undergrad schools, it matters, okay? Undergrad reputation, all that, it matters, but not for graduate program. In fact, the best professors, right, they're not necessarily in the top colleges. They're spread all across. You'll see people from like the like mid-ranking average colleges, they have professors who have PhDs at MIT and Stanford or Harvard. That happens all the time. So when people look at careers, right, they don't necessarily, they have choices. For example, their wife may be from Colorado. Okay. They want to settle down somewhere in Colorado. There's no college in Colorado other than University of Colorado or Denver. So you go there and pick up a job opportunity in University of Colorado because that makes sense for your family. So that's how people make decisions. They're professors, right? They don't necessarily go to like the most prestigious school. They go to where it makes the most sense for them. Like if you're talking about MIT or Stanford or Berkeley, you know, what's the most fun fact about these places is that they're all very close to big cities and extremely expensive. If you are located in Stanford or Berkeley, you can never own a house in your lifetime. You have to make like any residence there, right? If you want to buy an apartment or a house, it's going to set you back by maybe 2.5 or $3 million in the region. And no professor can make that much, right? So it's like you have a choice. Do you want to work in Stanford and get that reputation, but never have a house in your life? Or do you want to go to maybe a mid-rank school where the cost of living is much cheaper? Like Minneapolis, $100,000, I can get a good house. But in Stanford, with $2 million, I could probably not get a house. So, I mean, life is complicated. It's not just about studies, right? And education and prestige. There's a lot more things to life. And when you settle down, there are a lot of other things you look into. So that's one piece. The third piece is that when you are applying to grad school, okay, this is probably one big feedback for students is never look at the college. Never, ever look at the college. The best professors sometimes are from unknown colleges. Like in the space of business, I'm in, like I applied for business programs and I got into a bunch of programs. Okay. So Florida State University has the best professors in consumer behavior in the entire world. Who would think of Florida State University, right? So I'm just saying that there are all these gems which are like Utah, for example, University of Utah and Utah State University. They're excellent for computer graphics. In fact, the entire computer graphics world originated from the research in these universities. Netscape emerged from University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. So these people have a history, man. So when suppose you are a person, a professor working in computer graphics, okay, that space, computer vision, computer graphics, University of Utah is a dream place for you. Because that's where all the best professors congregate, not at MIT or Stanford, they're at University of Utah. So I think if you're lazy, you would say all the best professors are at the top colleges, which is not at all true. They're spread across. Every university has a center of expertise. And the only way you'll find out the center of expertise is when you do your research. At the end of the day, when you publish research and if you're applying for jobs in academia after a PhD, right? What counts is where did you publish? That's what counts. And how many papers do you have? not where you did your PhD. Like there are innumerable examples of people, especially in business, who have done their PhDs at Harvard Business School and Stanford. They couldn't find any academic job in the US. They become postdocs, or they end up going to Australia for jobs, or some of them even come to India searching for jobs. There's actually a bunch of professors at IIMs who couldn't really find jobs in US after their business PhDs in like the best of schools there. So I'm just saying there's no correlation between like brilliance, prestige, and finding jobs. Everything is different. The best professors are spread across the US. Especially, I would say, top 50 programs, they could be anywhere. That's why the homework is important.
So what you recommend is we have to, as you mentioned earlier, you're supposed to check the tier one, tier two, and tier three journals. And after you identify them, you have to go to the tier one journals and check the professors of interest, like the professors who are doing research in your area of interest.
Area of interest, yeah. Go through the papers, download the papers, go through the papers. I mean, it's going to be complicated, but go to the introduction, the conclusion, areas for further research. Read all of those things, right? And by the time you read maybe 50 to 100 papers, you get a very good sense of what is happening in the space. That's really how you create a statement of purpose. Then you write your customized statement of purpose, right? This will look excellent. Rather than say, when I was a child, I was interested in so and so. Nobody cares what you did as a child and all that nonsense. I got rank 1 in IIT. Nobody cares, man. It's all move on, right? Move on. Talk about the future. Everything is about your future, what you want to do, not about like what I did in my school, what I did then. Nobody cares, because professors also understand that you change as a person every couple of years. When you join undergrad and by the time you finish undergrad, you're two different people. You're no longer the same. You're moved on in terms of skill sets. By the time you work in industry or go do a master's, you're again a different person. So people are not the same. They keep building new skill sets as they move in their careers. And that's why some people like Satya Nadella, right, was a super average student at Manipal. I mean, Manipal students have nothing to talk about him because he did nothing at Manipal other than learning to smoke. And that's what some students told me. That's the only thing he picked up there. But then he went to a University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, which is probably again a very low ranked school. But then he picked up later, right, in his mid whatever is late in his time, right? He then picked up a bunch of new skills. So people change, man. I mean, look at it that way. So I think be ready for that sort of like a place where you don't necessarily focus on putting all your eggs in one basket right in the beginning, right? Just spread it out, choose wisely, make the right choices, talk to professors. Some of the professors are very painful to work with. They don't care about you as a person. You don't want to work with those professors. It's going to be if it's a terrible professor, you will have a nightmare for the 5 years. You can have a mental breakdown, right? You don't want to work under those professors. You want professors who will spend time with you, who will guide you, mentor you, right, and take you forward. And again, my sense is that assistant professor, do you know how the tenure system works? There's probably some more feedback for students listening to this. So the tenure system, the way it works is when you join any university, you initially you're placed as assistant professor and you're working towards tenure. So after 6 to 7 years of you working as assistant professor, you're evaluated for tenure. And tenure means that you have a job for life. You can do any research you want. Nobody can fire you. Okay. That's what tenure means. To get tenure, you should have excellent publication history. And you should be the best in the world in that space. So committee of professors are going to evaluate you. Professors from within your college, outside, the best professors are going to be there evaluating you, saying, are you the best in the world in that space? If you are, you'll get tenure. And what that means is that if you're a student working with assistant professor, there's a mad craze to publish research papers. So as a professor is into their own craze, you can join them and also get a lot of publications done. But by the time you get tenure, you're probably in your mid 30s, something, right? Like mid 30s, like late 30s sort of thing. Then people want to settle down, do less research. They get involved with government's projects. They get involved in industry projects. So associate professors and full professors, like full professors get pulled into administrative work, like deans and all that, right? They have no time for research. Or if they have time for research, they prefer to spend it with postdocs, right? Rather than train somebody from scratch in the PhD program. And in many labs, I hear that like professors have no time for students. So basically say that, hey, postdoc, come here, you work with this PhD student, right? That's it. They just delegate all the work to PhD students. So you think you're working with a professor, but you actually end up working with a postdoc in that lab. So every lab is different. Every professor is different. The only way you can learn about this is you have to, if possible, reach out to people within the college, talk to them, have conversations. If there's an Indian community there, reach out to them, email them, have a good conversation, right? You never know what professor you're going to end up with, and you have to end up with a professor who mentors and guides you. Otherwise, a PhD is not the place where you want to be in.
Thank you, sir, for your insight on that question. Um, I think coming back to the question which we had earlier, what's the value of international competitions on your resume, like hackathons
Doesn't
and
matter. Only job, like recruiters look for that. Like when it comes to higher studies, it doesn't matter at all.
okay.
So I'll tell you
And
where it matters. If you have computational skills, for example, in a sector, a core sector where, for example, when I was thinking of a PhD, right, there were a lot of professors in the space of economics who were working with big data, but they had no idea how to do coding. So anybody who said that they have coding experience, right, would easily get full scholarships and PhD admits into these colleges. Likewise, if you're looking at, for example, materials, like one of the students I'm working with at Berkeley right now, like we're in touch very often. So he has a very interesting background. He's a topper from material science from IIT Madras, worked for 2 years in PayPal and data analytics, and then went for a PhD at Berkeley. So the professor values this guy because he can work with data in a way which nobody else can work. Most people are jumping to a PhD program, right, without work experience. So they probably don't have enough exposure to the real world. So, so my mentee actually has a awesome exposure, right? And he's very valued. Maybe this is how he will get some fantastic research projects in terms of being able to get some insights which nobody has. This is really where the breakthrough thinking happens. Somebody bringing a very different perspective from a different world and applying that to a core space where people have always been solving problems the traditional way. So it is valued in academia if you bring in some computational skills, right, to a non very traditional sector where things have always been done in a very different way, like civil engineering, applying all this concept of AI, ML. I think it's going to be fantastic work. In fact, one of the professors at Columbia Business School, he was JE rank 2 at one time, and he actually, this entire JE counseling, right, the way it works to prevent a lossage of seats at the end of the counseling process, that entire algorithm was designed by that one professor at Columbia Business School. Yes, because he wanted to make sure that it's an optimization problem, right? He's in the space of operations research. This is a classic problem, right? How do you prevent students from, like, you have a lot of seats, a lot of students, and a lot of preferences, and you don't want a situation where a lot of people left behind and there are a lot of seats left behind and people didn't get what they want, right? So he came up with a certain algorithm which is being used right now. So I'm saying that sometimes a lot of problems you face in industry can also be used to solve real life problems. And people in academia are well known for doing those problem solving.
thank you for your insight on that question as well, sir. One last question which we'd like to ask is, what is the value which research projects have as such? Like, let's say I'm taking up a specialization. Let's say I've decided to specialize in computer vision, and I've created a set of projects like identifying hand signs for deaf and blind people, let's say. In that case, what's the value of a project on your grad school application?
Projects are very, very important, right? Because professors realize that not always that every research you do ends up with a paper publication or a poster presentation. It doesn't always work that way. Sometimes, right, it is okay to enter a PhD program without publications. You can still learn because the purpose of PhD is to train you in doing research. So if you do a bunch of projects under professors, you'll gain in two ways. One is you'll know a lot about this space, and you can use that to create a very good statement of purpose. Okay, that's one way you can gain. The second way you can gain is you can get good letters of recommendations from professors or research scientists in this space. For example, you join TCS research or Microsoft research, do some very good projects, right? You can actually use that experience to get a good letter of recommendation for higher education, for a MS or PhD program, and that always happens. So I think there are definitely lots of ways to get experience. So I think the best way to get research experience is to work long term with a professor. If not, you could work with, say, private institutions like Microsoft Research or IBM Research and so on, but work under people who already have a very good history of publications, right? Work with those people. I think that's also a very good way of getting experience. The other ways, you can work in all the Indian, like, governmental institutions like ISRO, IASC, like there's a bunch of schools, right? Baba Atomic Research Center. So again, you can get some very good exposure that way. If none of these work, I recommend that if you know that you're going for higher studies, then don't waste time doing industrial internships unless it's research focused. Better thing is just tell a professor in your college saying, hey, I want to spend this summer working with you. Let's work on some project. You may not get paid for it, but that experience itself, right? Putting something on your resume will make your resume stand out. And if you stop applying to the top 20 universities, right? And even if you don't have a stellar resume, if you just maybe aim for colleges who are probably between like 50 to 70 or 70 to 100, and easily get in with full scholarships. And see, like I know a friend who went to Clemson University, did his PhD in 3 years, and ended up working in industry and is doing very well in his career. I'm saying that there's all these combinations which exist, right? Like there's no connection between the reputation and what job you get. It ultimately depends on what you bring to the table. And every year of work experience you get, your value in the market goes up dramatically. So if you have a PhD with say 1 year of work experience, you're way more valuable than just a pure PhD. I'm talking about jobs, industry jobs. Likewise, if you're a PhD with 5 years of work experience, you're again worth a lot more than just a pure PhD. So likewise, right, you can quickly see that it doesn't matter what your background is or where you graduated from. What matters, what did you learn, right? What sort of research can you do? So I have a friend, for example, he did his undergrad in mechanical engineering, went to University of Minnesota to do a PhD in a very strange space. It's about like studying blood flow in the body, capillaries and veins and all that, right? In terms of how that flows across the body. So he worked in, I think, all this fluid dynamics and all that. He did that research for maybe 10 years. Now he's working as like he's like working as a director at Facebook. He's leading like AI research into again this space. It looks like that's a hot space, and it's about it's less about the actual problem in terms of what he did. It's more of the skills he gained by working for many years in this space, and how can he then resolve AI problems? Maybe how to place ads by studying how to like how blood flows in your body. That's what he's working on, and he's doing very well.
All right, sir. That was an interesting insight. Uh, One last question which we would like to ask is, can you please guide us on how to uh, cold email professors and actually get responses from them successfully? Most of the students here, either they're not getting the responses successfully, for like let's say every 100 emails, they don't even get responses to one. And I completely understand that this is normal in the cold emailing spectrum. But how to increase the chances? How can we write better cold emails so that we can increase the chances of actually getting replied back to?
So one of the students actually was working with my brother in terms of doing a like a sort of internship with him, and she wanted to cold mail professors, and my brother gave some tips. Actually, this person ended up getting like 4 offers from US, 2 in Europe, and one from IIT Bombay. Like 7 offers. Very average profile. Okay, so I think the number one thing is homework. You just cannot send a random email and hope that it works, because there are at least like 100 students like you every day sending the similar emails to professors. Every day they're getting 100 emails, and you can imagine if it happens over decades, they're fed up, right? They're just not serious about these things. So I think professors realize that, but at the same time, out of the 100, there's always that one person who's probably excellent. Or out of 1,000 emails, there's one person who's excellent. So you have to do your homework, and really, there's no easy way, right? I would say, for example, if you know what research space you want to work in, identify a bunch of schools you want to be in. Okay. And target the professors in the space, go to their website, look at the research they're doing, download their research. There's no shortcut to this. Download the research papers and look at what they have done, make notes of what they've done and how you can add value. Write them a letter saying, hey, I've read through 40 of your research papers. Now, there is no way a professor will not respond to this mail. If you tell them that I've read 40 of your research papers, this is what I've observed, and you have to that is make it sound that it's not a general thing. What you, for example, you get to chat gpt, right? You can't be like, I just upload 40 pdfs to chat gpt saying, hey, give me a summary of all the 40 papers, right? Don't be so stupid, right? I mean, apply some sense, do your homework, because if you're cheating, you're only cheating yourself, right? At the end of the day, you need to do it in a way where you learn something from it. So go through the papers yourself, read 40 papers, 70 papers, 100 papers yourself, look at what is it you found interesting, make a list of it, make a list of what's happening in this space. And these things take time. It will probably take you 3 months or 6 months to get through this process, right? Do the homework, reach out to professors saying, hey, I've read 20 of your research papers, this is what I observed, what's happening in your space, this is where I feel I'm super interested. I probably want to do an internship in your lab. Is that even possible? Just send them an email, right? And they will respond. And my brother has said that it's happened, right? With one lady he has been guiding so far, right? It's been a success. So it always works, but you have to do the homework. And okay, let's also be aware that sometimes it happens that professors are away in vacation. They're doing some industrial consulting projects. Maybe they're taking a sabbatical. They're not checking their emails. So sometimes if you don't get a response, not everything in this world is about you, right? If you feel that somebody's not responding to email, it's not always about you. Maybe there's something else happening in their lives. Maybe there's some tragedy in their lives, right? Just show good faith, right? In terms of like, maybe just assume good intent that they've done the homework, they've gone through it. Maybe they don't have funds to support a student, right? No research funds to support a student. Maybe they're already flooded with too much work. They don't have time for one more student. So they don't, maybe they're too shy to tell you that, hey, I don't have a role. They prefer not to respond. Maybe they're swamped in some like last minute presentation in terms of some research funds they want, and there's some deadline coming up. So that's why I say reach out to a bunch of professors. Maybe like five, like if you reach out to 10, maybe if two respond, that's a great thing, right? So even if you do this homework for 10 professors, maybe one or two are going to respond, and you need to keep the numbers, right? Play the numbers, reach out to maybe 20, 30 professors. Um, and if you know what area you want to work on, by the time you do research at 10 professors, you pretty much know what the others are also working on. Because they also do a lot of combined research, they collaborate with each other. So you get a good sense. Yeah, it will work, man. That's the only way it works. Because I know people who have done postdocs in this way. So they have done the postdoc, like PhDs in India, okay, like IIScs or IITs. They basically send a similar email to professors saying, hey, I'm interested in applying for a postdoc. But then before I apply, is there positions in your lab? Professors respond, right? That's how academia works. It works by emails.
All right, sir. That was the end of the set of questions which we had come up together with. So we wanted you to give any final insights that you might give, like any aspiring grad students, so that we can end it.
Are we going to separate session later on, or is that it? Are we going to session Saturday or something with
Uh,
students, or is that it?
I'm actually trying to get the students together. Most of the second years have gone after their NSEM exams. So second year, third year, and fourth years have a different NSEM exam schedule since COVID delayed all of the first year plans. So we have been operating on a 6 month session for the first year, while second, third, and fourth years have been operating normally. So after I reach out to the other second years, third years, and fourth year representatives, then I'll let you know about it.
Sure, makes sense. Okay, my closing thoughts basically is that uh, don't be influenced by herd mentality. Make your decisions about your life in terms of like whatever path you want to do, right? I mean, you can do extremely well in a certain space. Nobody knows what will happen to your life, and you have to like watch it happen. So when I was at Cornell, I met a couple of friends. I made a bunch of friends. One of my friends was working in her husband was working in McKinsey. At that point of time, when I met this person, 2009, they were like, hey, I want to come back to India, do something, right? I talked about the pros and cons of coming back to India. Then this person did come back to India and then started this company called Udan, which, by the way, is a huge player, right? So they're actually like one of the biggest threats to Amazon and Walmart in India. So, I mean, I'm just saying that everybody goes through the same confusion. There's a company called Skilling. Have you heard of it? Like a mechanical
Yes, sir.
training program. Like I met this guy at Wisconsin Madison. We had lunch. He was like, I want to go back to India, do something. No idea what to do. Went back, identified things, opportunities, and now it's a huge company doing really well. So not just in industry, but also in academia, right? You never know what's going to happen in the future. So I think most importantly, have an open mind. Um, don't allow ego to hurt you. That is, don't be so full of yourself, right? Be open to learning from other people. That's most important. Have a very low ego, especially in the US companies. Like you have to be super open to feedback and ideas. So India, you always try to put people on a pedestal, put them into tiers and all. That doesn't work in real life. So treat everyone for who they are. Be open to learning yourself. Be open to feedback. Be open to making experiments with your life, and give it some time. Maybe some people find their career paths very early, and they do the same thing throughout their life. Maybe some people find that much later on in life, but it doesn't matter ultimately, right? It's not the destination which counts, but the journey which counts. So, I mean, I'm right now in Palakkad, teaching at IIT. I mean, do I need to do all these things to get to where I am now? may not, but at least I like the journey in between, right? So that's the way I look at it. Likewise, everyone has to choose like what makes sense for them.
Thank you, sir, for all the insights that you have provided on our questions.
Hey, awesome, man. Great talking to you. So again, let's be in touch if you have further questions. Always open.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Cheers. Bye-bye.